everybody. Welcome back. Glad to have you. You know, maybe you can grab a cup of tea or coffee or just a glass of water with a little bit of lemon juice in and join me for a while. It was my watering day today, and anybody that follows the water schedule that I do, it was my straight water day, so I had a little more time. And I was looking at different orchids as I did it and cleaned them, and because it's so cold, like we woke up and it was snowing again, and we said, oh no, Jack's out shoveling and I'm, visiting you guys because I'm slowly getting better. I think it's just a sprain, or sometimes you do jobs and you know you're doing more than you should, but you're still doing it, and we have to learn, get a little smarter. But yes, it's still snowing and it's still really cold, and it's a good time to do orchids. So what I noticed today, the first one, we're going to do a repot after, but I would like to do this first. So what I'd like to show you before I do it is, I'll just show you up close. As you can see, this is the orchid that when we were getting our kitchen redone, it somehow got knocked over by somebody. And I'd left this leaf, but now I'm thinking that I should just trim this little area and this little area, and I'll leave the rest because I want to show you something. Let's see. There's a scale. Sometimes people say, what does scale look like? Well, they're little round things like that. They can be smaller, they can be bigger. But what I've noticed is when you have a plant with an injury, if there's any scale around, they will go for that injury. So if you do have a plant and it's had an accident, keep your eye open for scale. So I'm going to wipe that scale off and I'm going to trim this. I want to leave the rest of the orchid. We were lucky to get a spike out of it because it did have a big shock. But there's not many flowers, but it did spike. And the leaves that are there are still healthy. But some of the roots had broke and this leaf had got damaged. Now, there will only be one spike because usually what you have is from the last spike was on this side. And there has to be like 2 nice leaves before you get another spike. You go down 2 and then there's a spike. So there's 2 healthy leaves and a spike. And this one, because on that 2 healthy leaves, it's where it spiked last year. So it has 1 spike and I have great hopes for it. And this, and you're wondering about this ugly pot. This is one of my first orchid pots. And it's, if you buy a gallon of acrylic paint to paint inside your house, quite often after you're finished with your gallon, you can wash it out and it's plastic. And so Jack drilled some holes in it, and I used it when I first started my orchids years ago, and the ones that grew in it were very, very healthy. So the first thing I'm going to do is wipe that scale, and every watering I hunt for scale. And I hunt all down deep near the crown, to the media, and just when you're wiping your leaves, and just make sure you got more time on your straight watering day to wipe really good. Try and get the dust out from in the crown, because sometimes that dust can pile up and it can cause problems. If I've never had problems, but mine get lots of wash. And just make sure, because the windows are a lot cooler. I think they are, the temperature says 60 degrees. So in the window, it's 60 degrees. So yes, there's heat moving around the house, but where they are in both windows, it's a lot cooler. So you see, I brought them all in this way. Once the temperature warms up again, I can get more in the window. And the other thing you should watch about, if your plants are in a cold spot, most of my plants I raise up if the other window's even colder. So I'll put an upside down dish over a saucer, set it up, because those, if you've just got porcelain pots or something that absorbs cold, those pots, if you feel them, they're cold, and they don't like, that's their roots in there, they don't like to be cold. So I usually, because these windows jut out and the tile is cold, I usually raise them up so that there's air space in there so they're not as cold. So if you do have a cold area, there's another idea. So I heated these in on my gas stove really good, and they're just cheap ones. In fact, I cut my cocoa matting with it because they're only scissors I could find that would work, so I'll have to get them sharpened again. So I'm just going to snip and snip. I think that's better, and then I can keep an eye on how that continues. Probably eventually it may start to come off, but I have a little bit of cinnamon in this dish, and I'm just going to put it on the new fresh cut. Now, be careful when you're using cinnamon. Yes, it's a good thing to stop disease from coming and bugs from coming there, but don't go getting it on your media and be that liberal with it, because what it does is it dries. So it's going to dehydrate your roots. So be very careful, and that's the thing. It's very good, but be careful when you're using this cinnamon, because yes, it is drying, but that's what it's supposed to do. So I think this orchid will be fine. It needs one more growing season, and we have a growing season coming up. So I'll put it in its spot, which is usually right here. There we go. I'll just take this one out of the way for a minute. I'll put you over there. Okay, now, there's our leaf surgery, there's our little spot, and so good job. Quite often on watering day I get into mischief, especially when I'm stuck in the house like this. So, as you know, I had 2 orchids in this pot. I thought it was a great idea, and I had one in the top, one in the bottom. I had cocoa matting and bark. So all that is now on this cookie sheet right here. So what happened is one of them kind of seemed happy in there, but the other one kept falling out. I couldn't get it down deep enough, and I finally this morning, I got tired of playing with it because it keeps wanting to fall out. So, you know, maybe I can put a fern in there or something different. I don't know. I'm sure I'll think of something. But, so then I had to run outside in the cold up to the gazebo, because that's where I keep all my old pots. And I had this 2-tier. I used to keep it on the counter. And before I got smart about ethylene gas, this is the flowering time. This is the time you do not want to keep fruit, onions, anything that's a ripening out near your flowers, because it'll encourage them, it'll encourage them to drop. So you don't want to. Well, I used to before I knew that. And I used to keep my onions in this, and, you know, apples and everything. Now I keep my bananas in a bag in the cupboard, out of the way. I also have, you know, quite often at thrift stores, you see these, they're for sale cheap, all different designs and everything, but they're just perfect to keep maybe an avocado or ripening mango, if you're ripening a mango, and you don't want to keep it near your plants, then at least it's under cover. And so it's handy to have something like that on your counter for little things that you do happen to maybe take out in the morning. You want it warm, you don't want it sitting around. So in the midst of watering, I cut some cocoa matting to fit this because I quit using it. And I thought I keep these things because you never know when you're going to want them. So I thought, well, you know, the ones in the window that are in the cocoa matting are both very, very happy. So I have to show you this one. This one's blossoming quite nicely. Wiggle, wiggle. So, and the aerial roots come out, and it's quite happy in here. So I'm going to go with the cocoa matting over the wire, and I think they'll be a lot happier. And I actually will get. I'm going to put 2 orchids here. So the 2 that were in this will still be here. I'm going to put 1 more up here. They're all smaller orchids, so I think they will be good. And this is the one I'm going to put in the top. So I thought I'd do that. And I have these. I want to show you this one. Okay. I had the cocoa matting inside the blue flower pot. And as you can see, the roots were growing down into it. And the ones that are light colored, there's the ones when you change media, you have to let your plant grow roots to suit the new media. And so this is what is happening. Now these ones are still here, and they're probably doing some good. And sometimes you're lucky and they start sending a little shoot out from an old root. So I don't take them off until maybe a year later or 6 months later when I check and they don't look healthy. Aerial roots, we should see. This one kept falling out and all it got was 2 little buds on it. And I thought, well, you know, I'm gonna do that. So what we're gonna do is, I should tell you first about aerial roots. On watering day, and you're soaking your orchids, make sure you soak the aerial roots. Now, sometimes they're sticking out of the water. I usually have a little cup or a little measuring cup and I dump the water over. In a few minutes I go back and dump some more. Because the funny thing about aerial roots is they take at least 10 minutes of sort of getting wet as if they were getting rained on in the forest. And it's not until that last 5 minutes of 15 minutes that they actually start to absorb water. So just remember that they take a little longer than the roots in the pot to start to do their job. And sometimes someone will say, oh, my aerial roots, they look all dry and they look terrible. Can I cut them off? Please don't cut them off. They are so hardy. They are so hardy that if you were, and I would never do it because I did it years ago, I would not use water culture. It's just not for me. I killed a plant that was just loaded with roots, way more roots than the one I did in the bathtub. And I thought I'd hang it in this beautiful vase and missed it, and no, it died. It just kept going downhill and it died. But aerial roots are funny. They can take to water culture. They don't mind. They're very hardy. The outside is much hardier than the inside roots. And a lot of time when you're doing a new repot, they're what will keep your plant alive. And the one good thing now about this cocoa fiber is the aerial roots are going through it, and I can just cut this cocoa fiber away from the aerial root. Sometimes you can just rip it, and there we go. We got the cocoa fiber off. It's sticking to the root a little bit. So we got one plant ready to go, and this is the other one that was in the pot. So I'm using the same bark. They will know the bark is fine. It wasn't that long ago. If it was last summer, I think. I'm not sure that I did that. So we're going to put some bark in here. I moved my table out the way because we have a little table here. Now I'm probably not going to reach what I want, but there are ways. There we go. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit of my mortar for calcium in here. I don't want it too near the bottom because when I water it, it'll probably go down. So I'm going to put a little of my mortar in there. I have a lot of calcium in my water. If you don't know how your water is and you have city water, you can often go on the computer and get a printout of what's in your water. Our water is pretty good. Years ago they used to worry about people watering with tap water, but now I find a lot of people just go ahead and do it. And I do. I have some calcium that gets that way and plus this way. So I'm going to put one on one side, and this is the one that kept falling out, and it has some new roots starting. So it's getting used to. It has some new. This is coming. These ones are coming out of an old root I left. So yes, they will get new roots for the new media. And sometimes those roots that really don't look that good will sprout out a nice green one. So we also have some nice new ones and a little growing tip. The length of this growing tip tells you how fast it is growing. And this one is not growing real fast, and it was getting a little floppy. I wasn't happy. So the change. So one is going to go on this side, like that. Oh, we love to play. And this one's going to go on this side. Okay, get them in the right spot. Sometimes I'm doing this and I don't take as long as I should take. So these aerial roots will still be on the top of the surface or close to it. There. I think they're going to be happier, and they're going to be a lot easier to look after. That was getting to be a problem. I might do an experiment before spring when it's in the growing season. I might buy a new orchid, and I want to do something with my traffic cone, because if you watch that video, inside the traffic cone, hanging inside the pointed part, some roots, real long roots, had gone through the screen to stop the bark from going, and they had to be about this long. And I think there was at least 3 of them. So to make my bigger row cones easier to look after and not end up having to rip the aerial roots off the outside of the pot and the inside of the pot, my plan is to take this green and raise it up so that there's only maybe a small amount of bark, like a few inches, and there's holes, and those roots can grow down, and they love being in there, and they can stay in there. And when I have to repot it, then I'll just tip it, and it'll only be this much bark there, and it will come out easily without disturbing the whole plant. And I'm going to try that. I'm sure I could do it with the medium-sized ones I got, but they're a lot easier to deal with. But I'm definitely going to try a big one that way. And I saw a video online somewhere where they had just as big as my traffic cone. They had great big terracotta pots. There was lots of holes in them, and they were growing orchids in there, and no media at all, because the humidity, and then terracotta, and there was this huge greenhouse with all these huge terracotta pots hanging down, and orchids for miles like this, no media. Now, what do we know about terracotta pots is they do hold the humidity more and they cool off quicker. So in the greenhouses, they can just hose them down, create that humidity. But I'm just curious to do an experiment to see if, because those roots were doing so good in there, and I'm still just watering once a week in the winter, maybe twice in the summer, the humidity stays inside there. And air can get in because of the holes. And I'm curious if it'll be similar. And we still have our bark at the top for the crown and to protect that area. So I'm going to hunt up a great big traffic cone, and I'm going to try that. Boy, you know, it's going to use about the same amount of bark, but I might have to hunt up some bark to put in the top for the other little one. But this bark was still good. It had been soaked. I put this in my big bucket, like a wash bucket, and down it goes. And every time I do that, the top one floated off. I couldn't ever, and I dig out all the bark. So, yeah, so I might have to, I'm going to put the one in the top. It got watered this morning too, but I'm not going to, I may have to add a little bark. I have to run out afterwards and add a little more bark. So I think we're good. I think I'll just put a couple little ones on the top, and this is my dried up mortar, because I don't use CalMag or something, but if you have low calcium, like I get a lot of calcium in my water, but if you're worried about low calcium, then yeah, you probably have to put that into your watering schedule somewhere. So there's the bottom. I think it's going to look really nice. It's going to be easy to look after. It won't get a soak, but I find a lot of mine that I just spray. When I spray my orchids, like the big ones that I take to my shower, I get some soaking, and then I take my big one into the shower and I just take the nozzle and I spray it all off. Now if it's a fertilizer day or something, I have my big watering can, which I mix it in, and after I've first sprinkled it really good, then I give it some water and with the fertilizer. Then I let it sit for a while, and then I go back in here, do some more stuff, and then I go back in about 5 minutes and I give it another drink of the fertilizer. I usually do that about 3 times. So also the aerial roots get sprayed every time. So there's that just over 10 minutes to 15, because they say they just take about 10 minutes before they start absorbing water. So it's a good thing to do. Okay, now, oh, I need my cookie sheet back, or my dish rack. So this will be, I'm not keeping this. That'll be garbage. Okay, let's see how this orchid looks. And I'm going to have to use the same bark that's in there here, and it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. So I'll probably run out. There's only going to be one orchid in the top. This got watered this morning. Now it's been in this pot for a while, and I'm going to show you. This is just bark, and this is my bigger bark, so it's still really good. It's not the new medium-sized Rexius fir bark. But this is one I had that's not in spike at the moment. Doesn't mean it won't spike, but I want to show you the roots. So it's pretty good for a little plant. It's got quite a few roots. Some long ones. Yeah. There's some new ones coming here. So it looks pretty happy. It'll go back in the same bark. So I'll probably try to keep it facing you on that side. And then I can just add some bark on the other side. Because it's a little bit bigger up here. So there, and I'm going to kind of rest it against the handle. And as spike grows up, it can, I'm going to make sure that the roots in the front here are covered. That means I've got to go back out in the cold again for me. I actually don't mind. I kind of miss not going out to help Charlotte, but sometimes you have to say what's better and, you know, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Okay, this definitely needs more bark. So, but I'm going to show you where it goes. And then next time I do a little video, you'll see it's going to sit right here. Well, it won't sit on that. Let's take that out. Now I'll put a saucer to catch drips, but it won't. This one won't fit. Of course, I didn't try it first, so that's where it'll sit. Should look very nice, I hope. And then I was making little notes when I was watering this morning. So, oh, that was the other thing. I wrote down new plants because Christmas we got some plants that came not from a local forest, but they came from through the mail from somewhere, from nice thought. But I'm not complaining about the gift, but when you get plants, you know, new plants into your house, keep your eye open because, you know, okay, watering day. There's a little poinsettia. Can I get it? Well, if I go on a little run, I think I can reach it with this. If I don't break anything, here is my claw. I want to show you. Or I might have to go on a little run. Whoa. I know, I should plan better. So anyway, this poinsettia came with some other plants in a basket. Now, it was addressed to Mom, and when she got it, it looked like it had been upside down 2 or 3 times. Some of the plants were completely broken. That I saved a few little startings. There was a wandering Jew, and there was only one stem left that was like not broke off, and I put it in the bottom of my ZZ plant because I have big metal things holding up the leaves because it's so big, and I thought, well, it'll be nice if it grows around there. And it's still struggling, but it is there. And the other thing I'm saying is this thing had lots of broken ones too, but I went to water it this morning, and it's my checking plant day today because it's just clear water. And I started to just, you know, just before you water, just stir plants around like that. Just stick your finger or a fork or a stick or anything in there. And if this one isn't that wet, but a little fly flew out of there. And sometimes that's what happens, you see. This was really wet when we got it, and I think it's starting to dry out now. So what happens is those little gnats, they love wet plants, house plants, soil, anything wet. And most of my plants, I put a little layer of sand on top, you know, like a ½ inch or so, or even an inch on some, because I did the greenhouse too. And apparently the sand is so much heavier than the soil. So if they lay eggs in there, they can't hatch and come out and they die. They don't hurt the soil, but they won't come out. So check all your house plants because I've seen it before. And most of my house plants, except ones I've changed lately, I have to get some more sand and redo them. But most of them have sand. It looks nice. It doesn't hurt them. And it's a good practice, I think. So watch new plants. If you go to any plant to water and you see something fly out, I would be very suspicious of that plant. Usually, you shouldn't get it in your orchids if they're in bark, just bark, because it's too dry and they don't like it. But I had seen some in the one I did in the bathtub, and I found out why. Because when I potted it, I did not clean all the moss. I had a good 1/4 cup of moss, that maybe not that much, but half of a 1/4 cup of moss, which was the culprit. There was none anywhere else. And now I haven't had any trouble. So that, you know, they don't need much. And because the bark dries quick, so no problem, no gnats. But the moss in there stayed wet and they would fly in there down through the bark holes. And anyway, so keep your eye, do your little searches, keep your eye on your plant. And I think that was all. The new plants, the cold windowsills, and holidays. I've had this question about if you're in Australia and you have to leave your house and your plants and you can't take them with you. This is a lesson from the greenhouse, because even though we have all this snow here right now, in the summer we get very hot, like 115 Fahrenheit, very hot. And the greenhouse even gets hotter because of all the plastic roofing. It absorbs all the heat. It gets hot in there. But my lemon tree and my orange tree, and the lemon tree is in blossom, unbelievable right now. They stay there. I have a fan in there. That's all I do. But do you know how they stand all that heat? Because we put a pond in there that's below the surface. And in fact, that's what's keeping it warmer right now, because the water is below the ground, even though it's open. So when it turned real cold, that water was still holding a warmer temperature and helping things stay nice in there. And I should go out there and get that cymbidium and bring it in soon, and I should do a video of, you go in there even now, and it's quite nice. It's holding at about 52 out there, and some of the geraniums have flowers, and the lemon tree's blossoming. Even though it got off, it didn't look good from all the ants this year.